Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Talk to Brazil is a leading business podcast and talks with business experts throughout the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American known as the King of Networking, connecting people from my studio in Brazil. Today's guest is Aubrey Wallace, and she's joining us from Nuenen in the Netherlands. Aubrey Wallace is the co-founder of Dandelion Branding. Dandelion Branding helps organizations dedicated to social and environmental sustainability elevate their impact, step into their brand identity through holistic content marketing. So Aubrey, before I get to that, I have one question. How did you get from studying criminal justice to co-founder of Dandelion Branding?
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for having me on. I think life takes you in a wild way, right? When you follow your heart. And I'm one of those people that's just always going to follow what my gut tells me to do. I loved going to school for criminal justice. It was fascinating. My goals were to kind of change the justice system in the United States and be one of those people that could do it from the inside. Mm-hmm. I specifically was focused on oppression and at-risk youth and changing that system. But I am like 5'3" and a woman, and I am very opinionated. And I don't know if you know anything about the justice system in the United States, but those things, yeah, I'm sure they don't mash well.
Right.
I quickly found that wasn't a heart-led space for me to be in. And so I moved to California, and I just I actually went there on a road trip and completely...
And you saw the ocean and you saw the mountains.
Yeah, and I'd never felt more at home. So I just said, yeah, I'm just going to move here when I graduate. And I did. And I have always really loved to write. So I kind of got this... I like wanted to be in California, and I was in my early 20s, and I was like, I'm just going to get whatever job. And I ended up being the administrative assistant for a rice company. And rice. Yeah. And so I ended up like being able to forecast what was going to happen around in the rice, industry around the world, because that was my job.
Right.
And I got really good at forecasting. And I realized that all comes from being able to understand and analyze statistical data, which I had learned in my criminal justice degree. And from there, the boss of that was like, hey, let's co-found a company together, because I just have this like entrepreneurial ambition all the time and always have. And I said, okay, so we co-founded a company called Ravishly, ravishly.com. It's still a thing. It's a feminist website. But there again, I ended up being in this data position and this strategy position. And when I finally was, again, listening to my heart-centered space, when I got settled in California, I said, what do I want? And I said, I still want to help people. I still want to make a difference. And I decided to become an herbalist, because I could work directly with clients. I could be focused on their health, and I could have relationships with my clients that were more comfortable.
You became a personal herbalist. Is that it?
Yeah, I'm a certified herbalist.
Okay.
I went to Berkeley Herbal Center for that. And then I started working for a company called Anne Marie Skincare, where I met my co-founder, Courtney Hume. We worked there together for several years. And in that time, I got even better at building those strategies, at looking at the data. The company had never had someone that said, this is what our data says, and these are the changes we should make with that. So even though it seems weird, like coming from criminal justice and then moving all the way into co-founding Dandelion, it's not. It's always been this like heart-centered, data-driven space. And it's always like,
I agree with you because I think I think younger persons tend to be put in a box regarding professions.
mm-hmm,
And I used to be young once myself, and then had guidance counselors who had said, well, you're cut out to be this and that. And it worked. I mean, their evaluation of me at that time was relevant. I don't want to say it was wrong,
yeah,
but that's the way I was, and that was the world I lived in at that time. Then I went to school
yeah,
like you did, and you open up your mind to other things, you see other things,
yeah,
and you start building on yourself.
right.
And I find that's just the way life is.
Right. And look, like criminal justice and like understanding our definition of criminal, it's literally just a label.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you this idea of people. It's a social science.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the study of the base interests of why people make choices. And
Right.
some of those choices are outside of the societal norm that we create,
Mm-hmm.
that we just like put these oftentimes arbitrary rules around. And then if you just don't do that, then you are labeled a criminal.
Right.
But actually, it always comes back down to that base need. So now I have this like this formal education in base needs and base wants, and what lengths people will go to
Mm-hmm.
get those needs and wants. And that's very helpful with marketing. That like
Oh, it
I would
is. No,
say,
but the
and
marketing is well, you've looked at you've seen marketing from inside out. Talking about
yeah,
rice as a consumable, talking about skincare, the outer
yep,
layer of the same person, and
yeah,
as you mentioned, statistically understanding rice, you understood the world, and then you started understanding climatic challenges for growing
yeah,
food.
yeah. That was a fascinating work. Sometimes I still think about it. We talked about before this podcast about like what you know about Brazil, and it's like I weirdly know about Brazil's like rice consumption and
I see.
production.
No, it's one of no. Everybody thinks it's just potatoes. It's not potatoes, even though we eat
So much
potatoes, but
rice.
it's rice and beans.
Yeah, so much rice comes from Brazil. Like,
No,
yeah,
and that's it. So it just shows that we know. I don't say we. Most people know a little bit about the world they're in. And when
yeah,
we're talking about sustainability, they know very little about what's happening in the world they're in.
yeah, yeah. Sustainability is also fascinating. It's kind of the Wild West out here in the sustainability space right
Hmm.
now. There's not a lot of rules. The language is still being formed. The you know there
Well,
isn't
you're
a
in the
lot of.
Netherlands, and for me, from my perspective, it seems more organized than other places.
That's fair. That's a fair but consumption. That's a fair assumption. But it's also like that feeling right before you realize you know nothing, where you feel like you know everything
Hmm.
and you're on top of the world. That's kind of the vibe that exists here right now, where they're like, I'm on top of the world with our sustainability measures. And we're about to step into this very real, very scary transition that people aren't really talking about that
Hmm.
is necessary, right? We're running out of fossil fuels.
Right,
Our we're desertifying. I don't just our agricultural space.
right.
We are cutting down forests. There's a very real and tangible, and you can see it. Even I'm looking outside, like I can see the difference.
Hmm.
Uh, change that, and they're a very real transition that we all have to go through in order to step into what will
No,
actually be a
and I
regenerative
feel
space.
that because I'm an American. I was born in Pittsburgh, and when I was born in Pittsburgh, couldn't breathe.
Okay.
We had to leave because I couldn't breathe. It was so
Yeah. Oh,
polluted. I'm
wow.
talking years ago,
Yeah.
and so things happen, things change. The other people, when I came to Brazil, one of the first things I felt here was the pollution. It's less
Yeah.
now, but there are challenges that are still ongoing. But some persons have, sort of lived or weren't born within the middle of that. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe back to Europe, younger persons or persons who've been born into a society that has this, let's call it a different view of sustainability than
Mm-hmm.
other places, are stepping. They may realize, they may not. They may be more vocal. But that brings me now to why Netherlands? What are you doing there? You've gone from the States to California looking at the ocean and the mountains. Now you're out underwater in the Netherlands looking at the flowers, beautiful flowers out the window.
Oh yeah,
springtime.
the tulips are popping off right now. So I was living in California, bopping around happily, running an art collective, like, working at ASC, like, and I go to Burning Man every year. And I was at Burning Man and I met a guy there and we just kept talking. And before the end of the first month of talking to each other, we had decided to travel the world together and we had a trip planned for Iceland.
Iceland.
Yeah, in January. We were like, let's go to Iceland in January. And the world aligned and I fell in love and moved to the Netherlands to be with him. And we're getting married now in just a few weeks. So
see, you never know where you're going, and wherever you're going, you never know where it's taking you. So
no, it's the journey of a heart-led human. Like, you're going all over the place.
Well, I can deal with it. I think what we have as persons, the emotional part, connection comes from the heart.
Yeah.
Now to companies and what you do in branding, how do you put a heart into companies? How do you make them perceive that sustainability is something to, not just to talk about, but to bring it into the heart?
I think that, right, that's what branding is. When like the actual definition is like building an identity into your business so you can compete. And that is very like business language, but what branding actually is putting that heart in there, staying transparent, staying connected with your values and letting that trickle through everything you do, every decision that you make, and every day when you wake up and you sit in front of your computer and you're writing content or, whatever you're creating, building products and going through formulation, all of that, it will always connecting it back to your identity and back to your values. That's branding.
But to the point, you need to you need to understand what those values are.
Yeah, you need to understand where those values are. So you ask, like, how do we get businesses to bring sustainability in as a value? We don't. We don't work with businesses that don't have sustainability as a value or that aren't interested in it, right? If somebody comes to us and they're like, we haven't talked about sustainability in the past, but we would like to bring that into our company, we are more than happy to talk with them about, what are you doing that is sustainable? Because
first of all, are you sustainable?
Or first of all, are you doing something? Yeah. We're not going to lie. We don't greenwash. That is like the antithesis of Dandelion Branding. No. But if we have a company right now that is very actively transitioning into being a more sustainable company. And we are doing an internal literacy program with them to help change the mindset of their staff so that they can naturally bring sustainability into their choices.
Literacy program. Internal literacy program.
Yeah, like an environmental. Yeah, so it's a BIM company so they're in construction and they do design before a building is constructed. It's fascinating, and it's also construction is one of the biggest polluters. So we felt really excited to be able to work with the folks that build and design. And so our goal with this program is to help them step into the mindset of sustainability first. So when they're designing a new building, for instance, they can think about, what are we doing with gray water? Where are we putting solar panels? How are we getting power? What way does the roof face? Because if the roof is facing southwest, then they're more likely to be able to get more solar power, right? Like, these sorts of orientation.
That's north of the equator.
North of the equator, yes. So these sorts of small shifts for people, that especially in positions that they're designing infrastructure for the future, is is one of the most important things we can do for sustainability right now.
So that's really square one on the playboard. You
Yeah.
back to basics within a company.
Yeah.
Literacy, right? The literacy program
Yeah.
along the lines of sustainability.
Yep. We'll start there and we go all the way to like, what do you say to a front end user? We also work with a courier company that has electric vehicles and they are working to create, they only do medical delivery, for instance, and they are working to create an efficient network throughout the United States because every state has its own rules around chain of custody, which can be frustrating if you're going interstate for different sorts of therapies.
See, that's a concept. You brought up the criminal and justice system in the United States. No, it's a difference when we look at Europe has sort of homogenized itself in regulations. So when you look at Europe, you'd see each individual country, you have individual everything. Today it's more collective and it's more intertwining on the borders. The United States is really a compendium of states. With each one of them, you really have to figure out a whole bunch of stuff. Brazil is a federation, so things are pretty much the same everywhere. We're talking about we're talking sustainability, we're talking about but everything. So it is one thing in that sense. It's easier to understand from a business sense. The United States, back to you said, it becomes very complicated.
It immediately becomes complicated. If you have to cross state lines, poof, your taxes change, your rules change, any sort of regulation, like you have to know, and they're making that a bit harder.
Well, that's a sustainability. What I feel, each state sort of has a different vision of what that's all about.
Yeah, well, I would say that each European country also has a different vision. What I appreciate about Europe is their train system, I would say. That is very collaborative. Yeah, it has to be. So they're building high-speed trains, and Germany is in the forefront of that. But Germany is also generally struggles a little bit more with having the citizens get into a sustainable mindset. So there are radically different mindsets throughout Europe, even though the lawmakers come together more readily, I would say.
Well, but to that point, trying to reach consistency across multicultural, multilingual countries, which is, it's not one language there. So that's not easy. But to what you do at Dandelion, do you have clients everywhere, or are they focused in Europe?
Yeah. So we have clients predominantly in the United States and in Europe. If I have clients in Europe, then I like to go visit them because a lot of times because I'm in Europe, and if we can swing a visit into the US, that's also important. But that's harder because you have to go by plane, which is not a sustainable way to travel.
Right.
So
that means you won't come to Brazil ever. Is that it?
Oh, I'll come to Brazil. Yeah. I think we can't stop our lives, until, sustainable travel is a challenging topic.
But I think it's a necessary topic because we don't understand the world as you have done. You can only understand the world if you see part of it.
Yeah.
If we don't get out of where we are, our own backyard, we can't understand a global conversation.
No. And I'm from a part of Michigan where people just don't leave. They don't I think everybody has the part of them that, you grow up, you're born, you grow up, and you die in the same place. There's...
Well, I had that until I got on a plane and came to Brazil. So, and you had that before you got on, you went to California. No, but it's opening up. It's getting out and seeing. That's all. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I understand how that. Even in Brazil, we have places that people just don't leave where they are.
And I think that's really normal. But I don't necessarily know if I feel comfortable with people that feel that way, being lawmakers or being like policy, especially as it relates to sustainability. Because even though I look outside and see the Netherlands and you look outside and see Brazil, we're all in one planet.
Right.
And in that way, we all have really one massive ecosystem with all of these minor little things, like we share clouds, we share air. And it's really important that we understand what we do to the environment here impacts what happens to the environment there. Same thing with sustainability in terms of clean water or the way we treat people.
Right.
There are so many people in the world that are treated horribly at their workplace or just by their government. And that's not...
Or amongst themselves.
Or among themselves. Yeah, that is not a sustainable way to that. Yeah. So for me, sustainability also has to do with how we treat each other.
And so that's your first step in any business arrangement, any client that you come to. So they need that. And I see you say you are also on your site, you're a woman-owned and operated sustainable marketing agency.
Yes.
Do you prefer female-owned companies or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I'm trying to think right now. We're actually working more with male-owned companies, but that shifts back and forth for us.
One more question. You're 5'3", right?
Yeah, I'm short.
No, you're not short. Your
short.
feet reach the ground.
I'm very short.
Well, my mother was 4'9".
Okay.
So that's short. But anyway, you have your perspective from that perspective.
Yes.
All right. And you have a multiple perspective also from being a woman.
Yes.
I'm unfortunately in a country. It's like unfortunately, I'm in a country, fortunate to be in a country, but unfortunately the view of women here is different. This is probably the country in the world that you have spouses murder their wives on a daily basis here.
Wow.
So it's still a macho type environment.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of work doing that. There's a lot happening to try to elevate women in terms of business and anything. Yeah. But it's still a challenge because there's so many hurdles to come over. And that's sustainability. You can only sustain a country if you can sustain the people that are in it.
Yep.
If you kill, if you say, back to what we were about treating people, if you kill your wife, your girlfriend, whatever, it could be a male partner, there's something really wrong. And that needs to change.
If that's if that's a societal norm, that's problematic. Yes. I think
the world is made up. I would say it depends on where you are. If you say it's half women, half men, half whatever. But we need to understand various points of view. And from different altitudes or different heights.
From different heights, absolutely.
We're not all one thing.
We're not all one thing, different. And, oppression is real. And in general, it can happen societally. It can happen familially. It can happen within your workplace. And it's not a safe or sustainable way of operating. And so when you ask, like, do I prefer to work with women-owned businesses? I love working with women-owned businesses, but I also am one, and I like to hire women. So I like to, we put forward, we're a woman-owned business because we are empowering ourselves.
Right. You should.
Yeah. To say we're here and we're making a difference, and this is how we're choosing to have an impact, and this is how we're putting forward our role, and we work with people who want to bring that into the world.
That's part of your brand. That's part of you and your company.
It is. Yeah. It's also it's also, yes, my company, but also Courtney, my business partner, is an amazing woman, and we also immediately connected when we met because of this topic, because we both, like, she also went to school for an interdisciplinary study, also studied this like oppression and how to change it and how to grow through it. And so the social enterprise and the social aspect of sustainability is something that we both hold really as a really important piece. And it's not just environmental, even though that's what we call our podcast.
Well,
It's
no,
not
really,
just,
I don't want to say the buzzwords. The words are important to be found.
yeah,
The words are important to be found. And that's to our brands. It's what we say and how we say it is how we're going to be found.
absolutely.
And what people are looking for. But anyway, sustainability is the word. It's the challenge.
Yep.
And I want to congratulate you and Courtney for what you're doing, what you have done, and certainly more for what you will do. Because
Thanks.
the past is the past, but the future needs to be preserved and nurtured.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we gotta.
for our listeners, how can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Aubrey Wallace. That's Aubrey, Wallace, as in William Wallace, same spelling. Find that's helpful. You can also search LinkedIn for Dandelion Branding. We are not hard to find as a marketing agency. We're around. And you can check out our website at dandelionbranding.com.
Very good. So for persons who think that dandelions were a bad thing in your yard, you've changed that to it's a good thing to have around, right?
Yeah, can we touch on that for a second?
Sure.
Because dandelions are a vibe, okay? They are so helpful. They help improve the soil. They are the first bee food. They are very good food for humans. Like, if you get dandelions in your yard, you should feel honored and you should cherish them, because dandelions are so amazing and they're very good at procreating. But every time you see a dandelion, know that it is fixing the soil for you and helping the biodiversity of the space that you are living in.
So I got step one in literacy, right? Because
I think
seriously. No, it's perception is what people tell you. See dandelions popping up in your yard. Some places, you don't have dandelions, don't know what a dandelion is. But everything, no matter what it is, should be sacred. It should be preserved.
You cherish your weeds, because they're fixing your soil. They're fixing the biodiversity.
They grow faster than everything else.
Yeah, they're great.
Very good. Well, again, thank you for being part.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's been really lovely meeting you and coming on the show.
For me too, it was great. And for our audience, it's Aubrey Wallace, Aubrey, and the last name Wallace. Find her on LinkedIn and also dandelionbranding.com. Dandelionbranding.com. Thanks to all our listeners and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, focusmi.com. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.